Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. King, I enjoyed your models. Good testimony. Even I could follow the Legos. Now, Senator Murray just posed the question to Ms. Vito along the lines of registered apprenticeships are the gold standard for quality, but you suggested that they are static, constrictive, and actually do a disservice to the apprentice. So I guess I'm just following up. Are registered apprenticeships the gold standard, or do you feel not?
I think apprenticeship in its basic form is the gold standard, but whether it's registered or not registered, that all depends on the innovation and the individual designs of the companies. So in its apprenticeship in its basic form, yes, but to say registered is the gold standard, I'm not so certain of that. I went through the registered apprenticeship system, and it worked for me. It took me out of an extremely poor neighborhood, and it moved me into the middle class. So I have all the love for it, but it hasn't changed with the innovation that we see today.
Now, Ms. Vito, you suggest it hasn't changed. I'm from healthcare, and I will say, you know, I technically still teach medical residents, and it's somewhat of an apprenticeship program. And there's a certain dynamism. If there's a new procedure that comes along, I will take the young resident and show he or she the new procedure. But I can also accept that there are some things that have been set in a way and don't change. Is that not true? Is Mr. King's analogy of the Legos in place and unable to be moved not sometimes true of a registered apprenticeship? Knowing that healthcare might be different, because I do think there's a certain dynamism that's reflected as we teach healthcare.
I think the dynamism of healthcare is reflected in the registration process, and I also think it's very important to recognize the strides that have been made to improve the administration of the registered apprenticeships. Is one of the reasons that we were able to register them in healthcare. First, the U.S. Department of Labor has added a competency-based model. That's the mechanism under which most of our healthcare apprenticeships are registered. Second, the technical assistance that's been offered through the Department of Labor is enriched the process so that the dynamism and the quality is incorporated into the registration process. So we have not found it rigid, but rather have found real value in.
Outside of healthcare, though, is there? Let me just go to Mr. Johnson. Outside of healthcare, is there rigidity within, as Mr. King suggests, within the registered apprenticeship program?
I think it stems from a perception of the burdensome aspect of apprenticeships. Not saying that the different models that are out there and that are available through the DOL, and I love the performance-based model that the DOL has come out with, but there is a general perception, at least by a large amount of business organizations, that it is burdensome. Now, whether it is or it isn't, that's the perception, and perception is reality in the eye of the beholder until you change that. So it's something you have to overcome in a narrative one way or the other.
Now, in your written testimony, you seem to suggest it's more than a perception, it's a reality, that the burdensome nature of it, the fact that, or maybe it was Mr. Holland, that one piece of paperwork wasn't completed and all this application went for naught.
Right.
Et cetera. So that suggests that there is a bureaucratic aspect which works against the employer.
There absolutely is, and that affected a number of employers, not just BASF, and hundreds of potential trainers that literally got stopped by one piece of paper.
And let me compliment you, because I'm aware that BASF in my state of Louisiana is a pathway, as Mr. King suggested, to the middle class for many folks. Mr. King, does the IRAP process that you are working on, does that address this bureaucratic, cumbersome, one piece of paper wasn't filled out, all this effort is wasted, that Mr. Johnson speaks of?
It's still in the works, but yes, I believe that we're on a pathway to mitigate against those types of restrictions.
Okay, and Mr. Johnson, one more thing. You spoke in your testimony about Germany and how they integrate the thing. Now, I will say that I've been to high schools in Louisiana in which in the senior year, a young person can take EMT courses and graduate as a certified EMT. Or in their high school, they can take welding, sponsored by ABC, by the way, that bought the equipment, and they are taking welding classes, and they graduate perhaps not as a master welder, but as a welder, who can then use that as a platform to put the Legos on to go to more training. So it does seem that there's a way to integrate that. How can we do more of that?
I think we already are. Whenever BASF, whenever we dug deeply into the different types of models that are out there, we kind of really separated two different types of American apprenticeships. What we refer to as the traditional American apprenticeship that didn't always, or at least not very often, use community colleges as a foundation for skill building. And the new American apprenticeships, what I call modern, utilizes that and does all of the things in the performance-based apprenticeship model that the DOL has come out with. So I don't want to let my testimony only say that that was a hard enough hit against registered apprenticeships, we're not pursuing it. We absolutely are. We want them to be, because we want those national credentials. We want that value to come along with the programs that we develop. But we're going to design what the workforce needs, what the students need, what the future workers need, what the industries need, and then we're going to take that, and which is our next step, literally within the next week or so, we're taking that model to the DOL and saying, this is what we know to be the answer. Our industry partners have come together and decided what the competencies
I'm way
are.
over, and thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. The chairman